Big news! Wayfair's President's Day clearance is on now, and you can score tons of huge deals. Like Wayfair's best deals since Black Friday. Right now through February 16th, you can score up to 70% off everything home at Wayfair. Like up to 50% off mattresses with fast and easy shipping straight to your door. Plus amazing flash deals on President's Day. Shop Wayfair's President's Day clearance now through February 16th.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. At dawn on July 1st, 1916, whistles blew across a 15-mile front in northern France. Hundreds of thousands of young British soldiers climbed out of their muddy trenches and began marching slowly, upright, in perfect lines toward the German defenses. They had been told that the enemy's barbed wire had been destroyed, their machine guns silenced, and victory was only minutes away. But within moments, the air was torn apart by gunfire. By nightfall, nearly 60,000 British soldiers were dead, wounded, or missing. The bloodiest day in the history of the British Army. This was the Battle of the Somme, a campaign meant to break the stalemate of World War I, but one that instead came to define its horror. We will finish today with a history brief and a return to the History Shorts Conversation Series Vault with a conversation with James C. Nelson. A quick word from our sponsors. This day in history. On February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela was released from prison after 27 years of captivity under South Africa's apartheid regime. On February 11, 1929, the Lateran Treaty was signed between Italy and the Catholic Church, officially recognizing Vatican City as an independent state. Story of the day. By the summer of 1916, the First World War had been raging for nearly 2 years. Europe was locked in a nightmare of trench warfare, hundreds of miles of muddy ditches stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss border. The Western Front had barely moved since 1914. Each side, Germany on one, the Allies on the other, was dug in behind barbed wire, concrete bunkers, and machine guns capable of mowing down entire battalions in seconds. The Allied High Command, desperate for a breakthrough, turned to the River Somme, a quiet region of rolling farmland in northern France. The original plan was for the joint Franco-British offensive, designed to relieve pressure on the French army, which was bleeding to death defending Verdun, 150 miles to the east. By the time the Somme offensive was ready, the French were too exhausted to lead. That left the British, led by General Sir Douglas Haig, to carry the burden. Haig believed that with enough artillery, he could break through the German lines once and for all. What followed would be one of the most catastrophic miscalculations in modern military history. In the days before the attack, the British launched an artillery barrage of unprecedented scale. For 7 continuous days, 1.5 million shells were fired at the German trenches, so many that observers 60 miles away could see the horizon flash red through the night. Haig's generals believed the bombardment would annihilate the enemy. One officer even assured his men, "You will be able to go over the top and walk with your rifles at the slope." But the Germans had prepared well. Their dugouts were deep, 30 feet underground, reinforced with concrete and steel. When the bombardment ended, they simply climbed back to their positions, manned their machine guns, and waited. And the moment the shelling stopped, that moment of silence, was the signal every British soldier had been trained to expect. The whistles blew, and they went over the top. The British soldiers, many of them volunteers from small towns, schools, and factories, climbed the parapets and began advancing across no man's land. They were weighed down by 60 pounds of gear, rifles, bayonets, grenades, and rations, moving slowly, shoulder to shoulder, like targets on a shooting range. Ahead of them, the German machine guns opened up. Entire lines fell in seconds. Some units lost 80% of their men before reaching the first strand of wire. The Newfoundland Regiment itself lost 700 of its 800 soldiers within just 20 minutes. At another position, a detonation of a massive British mine, so powerful it was heard in London, barely dented the German defense. By the end of the day, British forces had gained only a few hundred yards and lost nearly 60,000 men. It was a massacre on a scale that no one in Britain had ever imagined. But Haig did not call off the attack. Instead, the battle continued, not for days, but for months. From July through November, the fields of the Somme became a wasteland of mud, blood, and shattered trees. Artillery shells turned the soil into craters filled with water and corpses. The stench was unbearable, a mix of death, gas, and decay. Men fought and died for yards of ground. When the weather turned, the mud became a living thing, swallowing guns, horses, and sometimes men whole. New tactics were tried: creeping barrages, smaller assaults, night raids, but each came at a staggering cost. Entire units disappeared in minutes. Letters home were filled with phrases like "going over again" and "holding what little we gained." Even victory began to lose meaning. One soldier wrote, "We are not fighting for ground anymore. We are fighting for inches, and we are dying by the mile." Amid the carnage, the Battle of the Somme also marked the birth of modern warfare. For the first time, the British Army deployed a new weapon, the tank. On September 15, 1916, 32 Mark I tanks rolled into the battlefield. They were slow, unreliable, and often broke down, but they terrified the Germans, who had never seen anything like them. One British soldier wrote in awe, "They lumbered forward like monsters of steel, firing as they went." Though their debut was limited, the tank hinted at the mechanized warfare that would dominate the 20th century. Aircraft, too, played a growing role. The skies above the Somme swarmed with reconnaissance planes and dogfights between early aces, the dawn of the air war. In this sense, the Somme was both a tragedy and a turning point, a death of 19th century tactics and the birth of modern industrial killing. By the time the battle finally ended on November 18, 1916, the Allied advance had gained just 6 miles. 6 miles at a cost of over 1.2 million casualties on both sides. Of these, 420,000 were British, 200,000 were French, and 465,000 were German. The landscape itself had been obliterated, villages vanished, forests were splintered into stumps, and the once quiet River Somme ran red with mud and blood. Haig called the campaign a victory. The Germans had been pushed back and forced to divert troops from Verdun, but few who fought there saw it that way. A British officer standing among the ruins remarked simply, "We have gained a little ground, but at what cost?" The men who survived, the Somme veterans, carried its trauma for the rest of their lives. Many would later say that something in them had died there, not just hope, but faith in the wisdom of those who led them. The Battle of the Somme left scars not only on the land, but on an entire generation. It marked the moment when the romantic illusions of war, of glory, honor, and heroism were all shattered by the grim reality of industrial slaughter. It exposed the failure of 19th century leadership to comprehend 20th century technology. It became a symbol, not of victory, but of the futility and waste that defined World War I. For Britain, it was the nation's baptism of fire. The young men who had rushed to enlist in 1914, the battalions made up of friends, co-workers, and classmates, were all decimated. Entire towns back home lost their sons in a single day. The grief reshaped British culture, art, and memory for decades. Poets like Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen, and Rupert Brooke turned their trauma into haunting verse. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? And in the cemeteries of northern France, the endless rows of white crosses became a silent testimony to the cost of modern war. The History Brief. The following is an excerpt from a past History Shorts Conversation Series episode with historian James C. Nelson. Search for the episode among our past episodes wherever you're listening to this podcast.
It was kind of a disaster. So these poor guys from this Michigan, most of these guys were from Michigan, and they wound up going to deepest Russia in September 1918. Then in November, the war ends, and they're engaged heavily with the Bolshevik troops, the Russian troops who were trying to dislodge them. They suffered through this horrible Russian winter. One of the companies of this regiment, as part of the 85th Division, was like 200 or 300 miles away from Archangel, way out in the middle of nowhere on their own. And they got routed by the Bolsheviks ultimately. It was a big disaster. The war was over. By the time they got back in May, June 1919, nobody wanted to talk about it. I think that's probably the biggest reason. I remember reading, and I remember they came out with an issue probably the first part of 1919 and said, we're not going to do World War I stories anymore. It was like, we're moving on from that war, So I think it just got sort of lost in the dustbin of history.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me again and for helping make this little show such a mighty success. If you are enjoying this show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both of those links can be found on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.